Hello everyone and welcome to a new School Talk here on March the 9th with you from the WJHI studios on a socially distanced production. I'm Clay Abels joining you today with a new guest for us here on our School Talk program, our Director of Facilities, Mr. Jeremy Shireman. How are we doing today, sir?
Doing outstanding. How about you?
Doing great. Excited to have you on the program today. I know I talked to Mr. Loeffner a few weeks ago about bringing you on, and now you're here. You've got a great history here at Greater Clark County Schools. You're now the Director of Facilities, but I wanted to start with you to talk a little bit about your time here at GCCS. And first of all, you're coming in here from Jonathan Jennings. Give us a little bit on your background here at GCCS and how you came with us here today.
Yeah, so I was hired, will be my 6th year in the district. I was hired as the assistant principal at Charlestown Middle School when Brandon Weinbrenner went over to Parkwood Elementary. Spent a couple of years there with Dr. Wesley and as her assistant, and will be my 4th year over at Jonathan Jennings. At that time, me and Ms. Bach kind of traded places. She wanted to get some secondary experience, and they had the vacancy whenever that was created, and so I've been at JJ ever since. I think I've had one normal year there, and then COVID has kind of hijacked the rest, so I'm glad that they're getting back to normal, and hopefully my replacement will continue on the good work that we've started there.
So let's talk a little bit about this. Why did this position of Director of Facilities interest you? Because you mentioned you really haven't got to settle in yet to Jonathan Jennings, and you're on the verge of getting a new school. So tell me, how did the process start for you, and what eventually led to you saying, hey, Director of Facilities, this is where I want to be?
Sure. So as you're creating your career path, you're looking at what your next options are. And so moving from the classroom into an assistant principal role, into a principal role, the hard thing in schools is you can never continue to advance your career and stay in the same location. So there are some future aspirations that I have, certainly, and this is part of that process of learning what the building projects, how those occur, learning how the money's distributed and appropriated, learning the rest of the process of central office.
So let's start with that. I know you talked about learning the process. You're not getting a slow start. As we talked here on the show before, the 5-year plan with Greater Clark County Schools, we'll talk a little about that in a moment with the elementary schools, but for you getting started, how have you jumped in here from day one? What are some of the challenges you've had to face? Because I know you've only been on the job for a month, but things are moving very quickly here at Greater Clark.
Sure. One of the things that you don't even realize is there are just seasons to facilities, and so we are in pothole season. If you've ever watched anything on the local news, you've seen all the potholes that are all throughout Louisville. So we're in pothole season here at Greater Clark also. So that's one of the first things that we've tried to jump on, working with Perfection Group, Chris Gunther specifically. He's gone out and got all those quotes and has the work started, but just kind of serving as that liaison between them and the district. On top of that, I've tried to be at every facility and walk through and just see those couple nagging things that probably can be entered and taken care of immediately, but also some of those long-term things that are going to be more extensive work.
So when we move forward and we look at Greater Clark County Schools, going back to some of our episodes we've had with Mr. Loeffner, the top thing on the agenda at the moment is the building of the new elementaries. There'll be 2 new elementary schools, 4 schools going into 2 total buildings. I know for you this kind of hits close to home because we just talked about you were the principal at Jonathan Jennings. Let's start with that first of all. How does the perspective of being a principal, now facilities director, does that give you an advantage when you go in with facilities because you have the mind of not just the building, but you know what it's like to be inside the building and the workflow and all of that? Tell us how that experience helps you in building these new elementary schools.
Sure. So, one of the things that I think many of the principals wanted from this position was someone who knew what it was like to be in their position. Because as we design new facilities and as we repair and improve old facilities, oftentimes people who have a background in architecture or engineering or whatever other areas may have been facilities directors previously, they forget about the functionality of the building and the general flow. So that was one of the things that a lot of the principals had advocated for whenever they were replacing this position, was to make sure that they had someone who knew what the everyday hustle and bustle of building looked like, so that they could help design spaces that were going to be useful versus design spaces that were that just fit into the space.
So here on School Talk today, on March the 9th with the socially distanced production, talking a little bit about the facilities and all the new aspects that are coming into Greater Clark County Schools here with Jeremy Shireman. our new Director of Facilities on School Talk. And to keep with it, when talking about the new elementary builds, what are some of the things you want to see in these new elementary buildings? I know efficiency is a big part of those things with HVAC, but tell us a little bit about the design and some of the things that you're working on as we speak today.
Well, these are going to be some of the largest elementaries in our state, and so just making sure our shared spaces are going to be able to accommodate that large number of students. We potentially could have 350 students eating lunch at the same time, could potentially have upwards of 75, 80 students having art, music, recess, PE, all those things could be happening at the same time. So how do we accommodate those numbers when normally we'd have to even a third of that in some of our smaller schools previously, like such as New Washington, where they're probably operating at a third of that. We're going to be much larger.
The last thing I'll ask you on the elementary schools before we move on to another topic is, when these are finished and developed, I know Mr. Lofton talked about it'll take a few years to get these all developed and up and ready before it's done.
Sure.
But how do you think, from your time in education, these two new elementary schools and the building overall at Greater Clark, how does that help as an advantage for the district, not just for the current students, but attracting future students into this area? Anytime you build new schools, obviously it becomes a much more attractive school community.
One of the things that I've always said is, when we speak of how important education is, and then you walk into a building that's failing or in disarray, then that message doesn't gel with the image that you're projecting. So it's really important to put your money where your mouth is. If we're going to say education is the most important thing that we can give kids, then we also have to give them facilities where they feel like they can focus on education and not other things such as filling HVAC or whatever the case may be.
Now that we can move on from the elementary schools, let's talk about day-to-day. You mentioned potholes being a big part of your day-to-day job, but what else is on the agenda in terms of conditions of the schools? Certainly, I know trying to get custodians and clean the place up, that's another big part of the thing. Just getting people to come in here and work is certainly a part of the job. But tell us, what are some of the day-to-day operations you're working on currently?
So big things in our district, I've been in almost every facility. I think Franklin Square is one that I haven't had a chance to meet with the principal yet. But consistently, the roofs, the HVAC systems, the parking lots, curbs, those are throughout the entire district. And I know we have all of those addressed within our next 5 years of our 5-year plan. It's really a 7-year plan at this point because we're in year 2, and so we got 5 more years that are added on. But all of those will be addressed, but those are the big issues that every building is dealing with currently.
For you today, you're stepping in this job just 1 month in. We talk day to day, we talk big picture. For you, the combination of both, when you get up every day and say, we've got to do this, this, and this, what are the 2 or 3 items that take up most of your time and say, hey, we've got to focus on this and we've got to focus on this right now?
It's just aligning where our values are and working with our outside vendors and making sure that the contracts are met. I've really been impressed overall with the Perfection Group with their maintenance. I've also been impressed with their partnership with Lawn Pro and the outside facilities, the landscaping. They've done a nice job. As far as the custodial side, I know we've talked about the cleanliness of buildings. It seems to be in just a few buildings that we're having the major issues, but making sure that I'm meeting with their liaison and working to get people hired and in place, working to get that supervision. So I believe that that's one part of the partnership that we're working to improve currently.
Last question I've got for you today. We've talked a lot about 5-year plan on this show. I know you talked about 7 years now when you look at the grand scheme of things. Your goals, 3 to 5 years down the road, where do you want Greater Clark schools to be at in terms of facilities and your role involved in Greater Clark?
Well, if you look at the condition of our current athletic facilities, what we've done there, and when you drive by and you see, you're really impressed. When I drive by Charlestown High School and I see the new football field, when I drive by Jeff High and I see the new football field, when I see the new tennis courts that are at Charlestown High, the work that's being done on the athletic baseball facilities at all the campuses, I want our buildings to kind of have that same immediate, you jerk your head around and go, that's the school where I want my kids to go to. We're already, like I said, we're already doing that by the places that you can see from the road, but in our new buildings and the additions that we're adding, I want everyone, when they drive by, their head jerks and they go, that's where I want my kids to go to school.
Well, Jeremy, we appreciate you having you in here today, sir. I know you got a lot on your plate. There are a lot of things to continue to move forward with, but I know you're off to a great head start, and we're excited to have you in here and hope to have you back in on School Talk.
Absolutely. We got a lot going on, so I'm sure I'll have to get some updates here and there.
Absolutely. That is Mr. Jeremy Shireman, our new director of Greater Clark County Facilities, here on School Talk, joining us today, talking a little bit about the updates with our elementary schools, the day-to-day conditions, and some of the things that are on the roadmap to come here at GCCS. For Mr. Shireman, I'm Clay Abel saying thank you for joining us today on March the 9th with School Talk. Just a reminder, for School Talk, you can find School Talk on a multitude of platforms here with us at WJHI. First of all, on our cable channel, Cable 184, on the radio at 98.5 FM, and audio streaming at WJHI.com. And to go with it, our social media pages. Reminder, you can find the show on WJHI's Facebook page, YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter. Show will be posted out there soon for everybody to watch. For Mr. Shireman, I'm Clay Abel saying so long, and thank you for watching another edition of School Talk here from the WJHI studios. This has been School Talk, and thank you for listening on 98.5 WJHI LP Jeffersonville, home of the Red Devil Network.